I'm Dina.
And I'm Suzanne, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Rise and Shine It's Hypno Time podcast.
With Dina and Suzanne.
That's us.
The purpose of this podcast is to help you along your healing journey, to become the very best version of you that you can be, and to create the life of your dreams. We want to give you the tools you need to succeed through personal stories, guided meditations, hypnosis, NLP, and self-hypnosis techniques, as well as interviews with experts in a variety of healing modalities, from energy workers and spiritual healers to chiropractors, acupuncturists, holistic medicine, and much, much more.
Yes, and we also want this podcast to be a place where people can come together, share stories, and be reminded that you're not alone. In fact, the healing journey is a lifelong journey, and we are just so thankful that you're choosing us to be a part of your journey and that we have you to be a part of ours as well. And with that being said, let's start the show.
I'm ready when you are. Okay, so we're here at Rise and Shine. It's Hypno Time with Dina and Suzanne, and we have a special guest who's got so many different talents and qualities that I'm just going to let him speak for himself. Dr. David Snyder.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Would you mind telling us just a little bit about yourself and what got you started with hypnosis and NLP?
What got me started with hypnosis and where? I keep wanting to quote Steve Martin. I was born a poor black child. But anyway,
the jerk.
Actually, my journey in this discipline really started as a way to kind of solve a lot of problems in my life. Growing up, I was the classic. I was unathletic. I had little to no social skills. I really didn't understand social dynamics at all. So I spent a lot of my time never being picked for sports, not being good at sports, bullied a lot. That was the bullying aspect for me was very, very instrumental in the directions I took. And because my family has always battled being with weight issues, I was looking at anything I could do to kind of find an edge, to kind of level the playing field, if that kind of makes any kind of sense. And so one day, my mom comes home from the doctor's office and she's got these audio cassettes. And I go, "Mom, what's this?" She goes, "Oh, those are self-hypnosis tapes." I go, "What's that?" She goes, "Oh, it's supposed to reprogram your mind and so I can lose weight." I go, "You can do that?" Right? And so I was like, when she wasn't looking, I went, and I started listening to the tapes, and for some mysterious reason, I was just hooked on this idea that you could use the mind to do things, and I started looking at all the different ways that you could become more powerful. And if you really look at everything I've done, whether it's martial arts, whether it's hip healing, whether it's social dynamics or social influence or what have you, it's always been a quest for personal empowerment, to make myself better and able to do and accomplish more in the world.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I'm not really shy about at all, and I make this, I'm always very upfront about this. If you'd have told me, 20 years ago that I would evolve to the kind of guy who's in a room 7 to 8 hours a day shoveling other people's shit, literally or metaphorically sometimes,
right?
I would have laughed at you, because my goals, for many, many years was simply to get chicks, be cool, and kick butt, and everything.
And then you'll have everything you need.
And what's interesting is I was really driven to answer those questions, and for some mysterious reason, the disciplines I was pulled to and the things I studied, because a lot of times what I wanted to accomplish with them were different than what the discipline itself was seeking to accomplish. I came in with a very different set of eyes. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that different set of eyes really allowed me to start seeing connections to things and disciplines that on the surface seem very, very different. Most people don't realize there's a huge amount of overlap between the martial arts and hypnosis, right? I mean, they're two completely different, and yet when you get deep inside of them, what you discover is that a lot of the things that work in one aspect work in the other aspect. So again, I basically went through discipline after discipline, seminar after seminar, and every now and then I would find one of these little radioactive solid gold nuggets, right? And I would take that one nugget of all the mountains of shit I had to sort through, and I put it in my little pack. And about 10, 15, 20 years later, I took my little bag of nuggets and I put them on the table, and I realized that they weren't nuggets. They were like Legos.
Well, yeah, you could build on them.
Just like a Lego, you can put them together in different ways to create different effects. And so all of a sudden, martial arts, acupuncture and Oriental medicine, metaphysics, hypnosis, NLP, and everything, and all points in between, they stopped being different things. They all became one thing. And when we put these things together, you've got a synergistic effect where the whole was greater than the sum of the parts. And one of the things that I started applying these things, and I started solving my problems. And in 2001, 2002, I moved to Los Angeles, and I didn't know anybody. And
what made you decide to go there?
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania.
I got
right?
you.
And at the age and for about 11 years, from the time I was about maybe 9 or 10 years old, every word out of my parents' mouth was, "When I retire, I'm going to move to Florida." When I retire, I'm going to move to Florida. Now, I don't know if that was a suggestion, but give that kind of suggestion to an 18-year-old kid. He hits 18, 19.
The last thing he wants to do is go to Florida.
He packs up his shit. And again, at that time, my net worth was about $300. I didn't have a car. I got on the train and I moved to Florida, and I never looked back.
Where did you live in Florida?
I landed off the train in Pompano Beach, and I spent many years bebopping, circulating between Coral Springs, Fort Lauderdale, and Davie. So that was kind of the area. And then
we're here in Destin, Fort Walton Beach area, the Emerald Coast. Yeah. That's why it's rise and shine. It's hypno time on the beach.
So long and short, when we started the Sleepwalkers program, which was the world's largest free hypnosis and NLP practice group in the world, at its apex, we had chapters in 13 states and 5 countries.
Wow.
The whole idea behind Sleepwalkers was we didn't care if you had 20 years of hypnosis experience or 20 minutes. All we cared about was that you had a great attitude, a sincere desire to learn, and a willingness to roll up your sleeves and do the drills and get the skills. And that foundation, I wound up becoming the president of the Los Angeles Sleepwalkers group. Our very first meeting was held on a Long Beach, UC Long Beach campus, and 4 people of note were the first ones to arrive for that meeting. You might have heard of them.
Drop some names.
Richard Clark.
Oh, wow.
Richard Rumble, Scott Sandlin, and me.
Oh, there you go.
We were the core members of the Sleepwalker group.
That's awesome.
And within 3 years, everybody in the hypnosis world was kind of looking, what are the guys doing in LA? Right. And we were like the Fab Four for many years. And then I wound up graduating from acupuncture school, and I moved to San Diego to kind of found my own fiefdom. Scott and Richard banded together, and a few years later, they came up with this idea for the Hypno Summit, which was the world's first online hypnosis convention.
Oh, wow.
Right? And I submitted some stuff for that because they were my friends. I've always supported them. And then a few years later, they got this idea of, hey, let's do a live convention out in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And we've always supported each other. We've always had each other's backs. And in this industry, that says a lot. That means a lot. And so we went out there, and I just started teaching, because one of the things is, we were all about just rolling your sleeves up and getting good. Right? You could not get a certificate from a sleepwalker organization. What you got was a skill set.
I got you.
And so that was what it was about. It was about community. It was about sharing. It was about practicing and training together with cool people who like to do cool stuff.
Right.
Love it.
And that idea became Hypnothoughts, and it became Planet David, as we call it, But what we discovered during that sleepwalker phase, at least I did anyway, was that a lot of the solutions that I'd come up with for my life, other people had those problems too.
Exactly.
And it never occurred to me that people might actually want to learn those things until I started talking about them. And then people just started raising their hands left and right and left and right. And we taught this stuff literally. You know, it's no joke that I'm so committed to being able to do this stuff anytime, anywhere, under any circumstance, for any reason. I literally taught hypnosis and NLP for free for 10 years before I was willing to certify anyone. Because by and large, what tended to happen, especially during the sleepwalker days, is you would see the product of every hypnosis organization on the planet. And a lot of these guys were armchair hypnotists. They could quote chapter and verse from every book Erickson ever wrote. They could quote the NLP manual. They would pick apart people. But when you ask them to get up and actually do something, they would come up with any kind of an excuse not to perform.
Right.
A lot of times when they did perform, they were terrible. And so we realized, at least I did, that if the overall skill set of the community is going to be a skill set rather than just you paid for a certificate to hang on your wall,
right,
then there needed to be a lot more hands-on training.
Actively practice it all the time.
And I did not want to be and I'll be honest, I'm going to be, since, you want to know where I'm at, this is my attitude, and it is an attitude, is I didn't want to be part of that machine.
Right.
I didn't want to be someone who's just selling a certificate. And so I spent 10 years making sure that the people who got certificates from other people could actually do the skills they paid to learn.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then my good friend, who just recently passed away, the late James C2, in 2010, literally grabs me by the ear, because James had been bending my ear for 2 or 3 years to certify people. And I said, no, look, this is what I do. I help people. I teach them. I make sure they can listen, motherfucker, is what he said to me. By the way, I hope politically incorrect language doesn't.
You're fine.
You heard me on my webinar yesterday, right? If politically incorrect language, colorful metaphors, swearing, or the word boobies offends you, take your graphite rod up your butt and leave the fucking house.
There you go.
But he said to me, David, you don't get it. I go, what are you talking about? So these people are coming to you to get better. They're going to other trainers, getting other people's certificates and saying they taught.
Certified, right.
And I'm like, oh. So then we started creating and designing our training programs. But I was very, very, very aware of what people, by that time at least, I was very aware of what people needed to be good in 3 days, 5 days, set, whatever the training was. And
it's more than just the structure. It has a lot to do with mindset and personality. Yeah.
It actually comes down to repetition. And what we discovered, we have a training process that we use, and it's called 3x3, which means that for every technique you're shown, you are required to do it no less than 3 times as the subject and 3 times as the operator, on and with different people. And you have to track every repetition that you get.
That's a great idea.
If you don't have a minimum number of repetitions by the end of the training, you don't get your certificate.
Good.
And neurologic, and what we discovered, I don't know whether it was intuition or by accident, but what we discovered is that the magic number for any nervous system to capture and hold a technique with the ability to actually perform it functionally out in the real world is about 3.
That's interesting. Yeah.
3 became our minimum. And then we said, we want you to do at least 3, but if you do 30, even better.
As many as you can. Yeah.
And we had people, like, at the end of one identity by design training, in 5 days, he'd logged 105 instant inductions.
Wow.
On top of everything else. Now that's more inductions than most hypnotists do in a lifetime.
Yeah.
Aren't the instant inductions generally encouraged as far as stage hypnosis and stuff? When you really want to quickly, I mean, I know you use it in regular hypnosis, but wasn't it kind of developed as stage hypnosis?
I believe it probably was.
Yeah.
For sure. But the reason we teach it on day 1.
I think it's smart.
Yeah.
It's actually like day 1 or 1.5 is you're by the end of day 1 or 1.5, you're already into making up your own inductions and just blasting people out of nowhere with it.
Wow.
That's awesome.
We literally have students, again, I'm not trying to brag. You can fact check this, but we literally have it on record where students during our hypnosis class were literally in the lobby of a hotel undergoing renovations next to a curtain that has an active running jackhammer.
Practicing on each other. Yeah.
100% success. 12 people were in that lobby, and it didn't matter anytime, anywhere, under any circumstance. So the methodology works, right? And one of the things that because the trainings are not regurgitated classics, and I don't have a problem with classical hypnosis at all. My biggest problem is that most people who are teaching classical hypnosis haven't tested to see if what they're saying is the only way to do it.
Right.
And so they pass on what they learned without ever saying, well, is there another way we can do this? And
I agree with you there.
And it's not until you're in the clinic or out in the street and the shit you were taught doesn't work and you have to perform that you tap into that creative side of you, that adaptable side of you, and you start looking for a way to make it work. And that's what it takes to be a great therapist, is because humans don't follow scripts.
Right.
You're right. It's spontaneous. It's impulsive.
Intuition.
Never underestimate a human's ability to screw up the process you thought you knew.
Right.
I'm an instructor and I'm not, a seasoned one or anything like that. But that's one of the things that I've always talked about in my class is, somebody developed these things. You have to be able to put your own personality, your own catch to it, your own mindset, practice things, research, experiment, and trust yourself and know that you have to do this confidently in order for it to be successful. So I agree with everything you're saying. Good job, Dr. David.
It's funny. I was, a few months back, this social media app called Clubhouse.
We've seen that, yeah.
Right? And I was like, and the coach I had hired to kind of help me grow my business at the time, I said, you should do stuff on Clubhouse. And I was on Clubhouse and I was hanging out in some of these rooms and people would see my name and they go, oh my God, I grew up listening to your stuff. And I'm like, you grew up listening to my wait a minute, when did I become the old guy? But it was gratifying also because these people, you could hear the influences of the things that we've been doing, coming out of them, but it's kind of interesting to just have all of a sudden you realize you're, one of my old girlfriends used to say, you're old when your childhood is a K-tel golden oldie.
Yeah.
Don't
get me started.
You become the old guard when people say, I grew up listening to your stuff.
I know. So we know that you're very, very passionate about a lot of things. And that's one of the descriptions that, we had read, heard, and talked about even with Stephanie, with you, is that you are very passionate and you specialize in a couple of different things. Is there something specific that you really like to focus on or that you're passionate about?
It's always about, for me, and again, this word tends to trigger people in certain ways, but it's about power, the acquisition of power, personal power, social power, financial power. And right along with that is another word called transformation, because without power, there is no transformation. And, the definition of power is the ability to make something happen, the ability to do work. And so every form of human endeavor is a quest for power. It's a quest for the ability to take the randomness out of your life and achieve a specific result. And so, but power gets a bad rap.
Because it sounds like you're wanting to control everything, and that's not what you're defining it as.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I evolved to, the first, there were two distinct messages that later became one message. The first one is to eliminate as much suffering as humanly possible. Physically, financially, emotionally, relationally, but also to show people what's possible. Tap into the magic that is inherently a human being and create change and transformation, both to relieve the suffering that you've put yourself through or you believe other people have put yourself through, but also to liberate you and empower you to create the life that you want by your standards and your definitions, And I think that's always been my personal goal, because I grew up a lot watching bad things happen that there was nothing
you felt powerless over
that I could do anything about. And I remember sitting in my grandfather's hospital bed, remembering my grandmother several years earlier and thinking to myself, I am never going to be powerless again.
That's a driving force, isn't it?
Yeah. And it really did become kind of my mission, and I always, and a lot of people kind of give me flack, but I think it's important as practitioners who want to make a difference in the world, that the first person you make a difference for is you. Mm-hmm. So you're no good to the world broke. You're no good to the world. You're no good to the world disempowered. You're no good to the world jealous or envious or frustrated because because you were taught to give all your stuff away and the rewards will be reaped in heaven. Mm-hmm. Right. So make yourself strong, make yourself wealthy, become an example
of what you're doing,
that life to the people who need that kind of guidance, and before you know it, it's much easier to share when your cup is full.
Right. It's hard to be believable if your life is chaos. When you are able to manage and control or manipulate, your feelings or your perspective, it's a lot easier to share it with somebody and they can believe it. Right.
And here's the thing. Some people take what I say to an extreme example. You don't have to have every aspect of your life dialed in, because no matter how evolved you are, shit's going to happen.
Right.
And it's going to take you by surprise. But you have to remember that this body that we inhabit in this vibrational continuum is a school. Mm-hmm. Bad shit doesn't happen just to punish you. Bad shit only happens to teach you something about yourself you didn't know. And so there's lots of different ways you can frame or reframe the stuff that happens to us. The most effective one I've seen is we're a school. We're here to learn. And therapeutically, whenever you have a successful intervention with a client, 99% of the time there is a deliberate or a spontaneous reframe of the event that you cleared. All of a sudden, the minute that emotional charge is gone, the resources have been added, their perspective on what was bugging them or holding them back in the first place transforms, and they can't go back to that old life.
It's like an aha moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And whether you do it intentionally, like for example, energy spinning, where we take it out, spin it, put it back in. These people go through all kinds of weird physical transformations. They break out in sweats, they twitch, and all of a sudden they have this epiphany. Mm-hmm. It came out of freaking like a soap bubble popping. They said, "Oh my God, that's what that was about."
Right. And you can't go back.
Yeah.
You can't go back once you have that aha moment. It's
and so anytime you can lead your client or put your client through a process that results in that spontaneous epiphany, they're on the fast track to healing and becoming whole.
I love it.
I didn't mean to step on you there. Go ahead and stay.
No, that's okay.
Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah, we appreciate this conversation. But we do also know that you're passionate in helping people overcome certain traumas and things like that.
Yeah,
and
trauma work.
I was wondering if maybe you had some words of wisdom for maybe any of our listeners who might be in the midst of some sort of trauma right now.
Something you want to share. Yeah.
Happy to help. First and foremost, some of the things I'm about to say are going to sound, on one level, they might sound trite, and they also might sound a little bit ignorant. But this is,
don't be suggesting that now.
Yeah, I'm going to pre-frame it because I've looked into the hearts and minds of little tens of thousands of people over the last 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
One of the things that you discover very, very quickly is that once you open the hood, to use a male metaphor, you look inside the hearts of those people, you see the same thing every single time. A scared little child, desperate to be accepted and loved and terrified of being alone. And when you can give that child that kind of security, that kind of love and acceptance and forgiveness, they can go through anything.
You're right.
They can go through anything. So the first thing that I always tell people, especially when it comes to trauma, is that you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. The feelings that you're having, the physical behaviors you're generating as a way to counterbalance or to compensate for the shit that happened to you. That's just like the check engine light on the dashboard. Driving down the road in your car and the check engine light goes off or on, you don't go rushing off to the garage to get the light fixed.
Right.
The light means something. The light's a communication device. It's a signal that there's something inside that needs resolution. But many times, because we don't understand this, we think something's wrong. It isn't something wrong, it's something needs to be addressed.
Right.
The fact that you can have, first of all, the fact that you can have those feelings and be aware of them means the universe did its job.
There's a message.
The universe built into each and every man, woman, and child on this planet a fail-safe device, a trauma survival mechanism that was designed to go into action when the level of overwhelm that we were experiencing, the boundary violations, mentally, physically, or emotionally that we experienced. Almost like the best way to think about it is like the old Ghostbusters film. They have this ghost running wild. They immobilize the ghost. They slide the trap under it. The trap opens.
Right.
Right in.
Hey, that's an NLP technique.
Right. But what happens is, in those moments when the trauma system goes into alert, it literally takes that fragment of your consciousness. If trauma level goes from like T1 or T0 to T10, T10 being a terminal moment, like you either died or survived, right? In which case the trauma goes back to this. As you reach that T9 level, that little box opens up and you lose consciousness for a fraction of a second. Kind of like when your computer spontaneously reboots.
Yeah.
And in that moment, that trap opens and it sucks that T9, T10 moment inside. And then your consciousness flips back on like the computer spontaneously rebooting. But there's this little container that has all that shit in it that's on an endless loop. It's a holographic fragment of your consciousness and it's on an endless loop. But your consciousness continues without that fragment. And that's that little part of your consciousness that's locked in that little pocket dimension, so to speak, that little container. It knows everything you knew up to that moment, but nothing beyond it, because that's still happening.
Wow. Right.
So one of the things that happens is you're not the way you are because of the shit that happened to you. Those moments are, I was teaching a webinar just yesterday, right? And I was using a very graphic example. You're driving down the road, happy as a clam. All of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, boom, you're T-boned by another car. Well, you were T-boned once, right? That was a primary experience. But in that moment, your neurology does what it always does. It takes that vibrational data and creates a representation of it in your head.
Right.
And it encodes it in a certain way. And it takes that shell and it locks it somewhere in the body. And that's what's screwing you up.
Right.
Not what happened to you, but the way you encoded and recorded that moment and the way you've been relating to those recordings. So when people wind up in your chair, the first thing I say to them, look, whether you realize it or not, the worst is over. The fact that you're in this chair, able to tell me about what happened to you, to talk about it, means you already survived it.
Right.
Yeah.
It didn't kill you. The rest is cleanup. You were already stronger than every single thing you faced. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting in this chair talking to me. And the moment that you can see it hit, and all of a sudden, wow, and all of a sudden you realize it's true. The car didn't kill me. The active shooter didn't kill me. The rapist didn't kill me.
Right.
Right?
That's the aha.
Right. And the moment they do that, they instead of being stuck at the same level as the trauma, they start going meta to it. And the moment you can get meta to the trauma, you disidentify from that container, and now you have control over the container. And so everything the nervous system creates, the nervous system can change. The question is, how does the nervous functionally, not from a scientific biochemical perspective, because that doesn't help us really. But how does the nervous system actually record trauma? How does it, and is that process different, or is the substances those trauma containers are made of different than our other subjective experiences, our thoughts, our fantasies, our beliefs, our daydreams? Truth is, no, they're not. They're not built of anything different. The difference is how we create encoded container, and how we've been, like the DVD that's recorded at 11 volume versus a DVD that's recorded at a 10 volume or a 5 volume. Your body plays the recording the way it's coded. Well, you have absolute control over the recording, over the coding system, the coding deck that was used to create it in the first place. And so there's lots of different ways that you can address that. But the biggest piece is for most people is you're not the shit that you think is messing you up is over. It happened to you once, even if you had similar experiences, that each one was its own discrete moment. Just like the old Buddha saying, you can't step into the same river twice. I was on a podcast, maybe 2 years ago now, and it was on relationships, and it was there was one lady who was one of the podcast hosts, and we started talking about therapy and getting over your shit and being bullied and stuff like that, because bullying was a big thing for me growing up, and I could hear in her voice that that she had some stuff going on.
Right.
And for some reason, I just got this bright idea in my head. I said, "Would you like to fix that?" Right on the air.
That's cool.
Right. And
Yeah.
And so.
Can I ask you a question? Did you do an NLP technique with her?
I used one of our hybrid techniques. I think I used,
because I was going to ask you next if you would like to kind of do a little sample. Is it something you'd like to do?
I can
show
do
us
anytime, anywhere, under any circumstance, for any
There
reason.
you go, because you're spot on. I just have to make sure all the viewers know that if you're going to listen or try this, make sure that you're not driving or operating heavy machinery or taking care of babies.
Yeah.
Well, let's ask a very simple question. What is it you guys would like to experience?
Well, it's always, like you said, when you open up the top of the brain, it's almost all very similar. So we all need repair. We all need self-confidence or self-love, or we all need to let go of something old or stop letting something affect us. So let's kind of go into the self-confidence part of it.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Let's talk about confidence for a minute, because I tend to piss off the self-help community whenever we talk about confidence, because I'm not an iconoclastic motherfucker at all, really. But one of the things, first of all, I do have a version of confidence that I teach to my students, but it's a little bit different, the definition that we use. Most of the time, when you hear people talking about confidence, what they're really trying to say is, I want to stop being afraid.
Right.
I want to be comfortable, right?
That makes sense.
The self-help community has spent a huge amount of time brainwashing people into believing that if you want to be successful, you need to be confident. But all you have to do is look at reality to know that that's not exactly the case. And I'll give you a couple quick examples really quick. How many times have you ever had something in your life that you had absolutely no confidence in your ability to do, but it had to be done, so you put on your big girl pants, you sucked it up, and you did what you had to do, and you did it? More than once, maybe?
All the time.
Let me ask you a question. When did the confidence come?
After I got over the fear.
Exactly. Most likely after you took the actions, right?
Exactly, because now you're not thinking about that anymore.
It's a fundamental, again, observation versus just regurgitation.
Right.
That's what happens to the majority of people, is the confidence doesn't come till they've actually taken the actions. Right?
That's
so
perfect.
if you buy into what the self-help community is telling you, that in order to be successful, you first have to be confident, and you're waiting to be confident. Oh, by the way, the most confident motherfuckers on the planet, when you ask them what they want more of, confidence. Right? There's always going to be, because you always think of your baseline as the lowest, but it's not. Right? And so if you're waiting to be confident before you take an action, 9 times out of 10, you'll never take the action until the universe kicks you hard enough in the butt that you have to do it whether you feel confident about it or not.
Right.
So the quality that people really want, who want to be successful in any aspect of their life, the people who really want to be successful, the quality you want to cultivate is relentlessness. That relentless determination, no matter what it takes, no matter how many obstacles I have to overcome, go around, underneath, circumvent, whatever, through. When you have that relentlessness is the true success trait.
That's great.
Right? And it will make you take actions even when you don't want to take actions. Right?
Is that kind of the same as perseverance?
Perseverance, determination, relentlessness. They're
Relentless,
all
okay.
Yeah. So if perseverance is a word that works for you, that kind of gets your viscera motivated or turns it on, then that's the word you use.
Right.
We call that a meta message.
Yeah.
So relentlessness is really what you want to cultivate. But there is a definition that we use that we apply the term confidence to. And it basically combines this idea of relentlessness with, so it's relentless determination combined with the expectation of a positive result.
Very good.
Right?
like that.
Relentlessness combined with the expectation
Write that down.
of a positive result. It's on the video. So
My-
in the show notes you can do it. But that's what we have really kind of taught our students is there's four core traits that we want to install in all of our practitioners: relentlessness, playfulness, curiosity, and a sense of being victorious or triumphant. And these, we try to really instill these as default states in people, because these are the states that are positive, that move you forward. Pretty much all the rest of them, and again, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, are negative states. And we have our nervous system has a negativity bias. The bad shit that happens to us, one bad event, assuming they're the same magnitude, your nervous system will record a bad event with 4 times the emotional charges it will record the magnitude of a good event.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a very strong amplification of negative stuff that your autonomic nervous system automatically does because it's adaptive. This will cause you to get off your ass and run from the saber-toothed tiger.
Right. The
Right?
fight or flight.
As opposed to sitting down and enjoying the drumstick from the dodo bird you killed.
Right. When you weigh him out.
The dodo bird and all of a sudden
run.
right? So and again, Chris Voss talks about this, The Power of Bad, which is a great book by Roy Baumeister.
Very good.
Highly suggest that for those of you who really are going to be doing trauma work or motivational coaching work, you really need to understand the dynamics of how the nervous system processes negativity versus what it does for positivity.
That's good to
And
know.
ratio is a major game changer once you understand it. On the surface, it seems like it's either urban myth or it's metaphysical bullshit. It's actually neuroscience.
There you go.
So, and once we understand how our nervous system actually processes that information and what it does, you can automatically begin to realize that every bad thing you encounter is only 25% as harsh as it appears.
Wow.
But again, because we have this bias and we can train our way around anything if we put the time and energy in. Every time somebody says something bad to you, it's going to have a charge of 4. Every time somebody says something good to you, it's got a charge of 1. So for every bad comment or every bad experience thing something says to you, you need 4 to neutralize it. It's a suck ratio. It's a suck ratio, but it's a ratio that it's something you can actually do.
You can do. Yeah.
Right?
There you go.
So
Very
so
good.
So when we talk about states or confidence, usually our confidence or that level of comfort that we want is contextual. Right? In certain contexts, we're extraordinarily confident. In contexts, we're extraordinarily not confident, right? Because we just don't have the history of success. But one of the things that we'll play with, we'll do a couple of things. But do you want me to do more of a hypnosis process, or do you want me to do like the world according to David process?
That one.
The world according to David. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
let's see that.
Okay. So it's very simple. One of the things that we need to understand is the human being is basically made out of light. Every aspect of you is just a different frequency of light. That's why when we do Chinese face reading, for example, which I lovingly nickname Chinese Vibrational Psychotherapy. Because I look at your face and I know your whole emotional history. I know how much grief you're holding on to. I know how much rage you're holding on to. I know how you handle authority. I know all these things from my Chinese medical background. I can also diagnose all your organs.
Wow. We need to talk more.
But one of the interesting things that happens is when you find a marking that is specific to a certain emotional event, and as a face reader, you begin to unpack that. As they go through the resolution process, the marking goes away. Usually in minutes. It literally just vanishes right off their face.
Wow.
And the reason that can happen is because you're not a solid being. You're light being refracted through different layers of density. It's just like when you've all seen the proverbial, you have this aquarium tank, right? And you have this ray of sunlight coming in through above the waterline.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes, if this is the waterline and it hits that waterline, where does the beam show up? It's usually over here or it's over here. Why?
Kind of
Because
refracted.
the light was refracted. It was bent. Your emotional energy, whether it's locked in your tissues or in your more subtle bodies, has different densities to it. And as you clear those emotional densities, the angle of refraction changes.
Wow.
Interesting.
And again, first time my teacher Lillian Bridges told me that the moment you clear a trauma from a person's face, the face changes. I was like, bullshit!
My friend.
And I went to her class. One of the things Lillian always did was at the end of on day 5, she would bring in random people off the street. And they would just randomly pair people with you. And they would take before pictures and after pictures. Before the face reading and after. And they were different faces.
So interesting.
Wow.
Crazy.
That is interesting. It kind of reminds me of, I mean, I know this isn't the same thing, but the series Lie to Me that came out for a little while.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of that because there is so many different facial expressions and micro
I
expressions.
picked that show for years.
Yeah. There you go.
If you want to do what I call active profiling, which is what the face is doing in the moment as it's processing emotions, we call that active profiling in Planet David. Chinese face reading, which is what we call passive profiling.
Oh, wow.
If you look at active profiling, like behavioral cues, micro expressions, things of that nature. Those are things that are changes that are happening in the moment. It's very active.
Right.
Passive face reading is what a face looks like after a lifetime of micro expressions.
I gotcha. Yeah.
So it's yin and yang of each other. So what we're going to do is, and what I'm trying to explain to you is, the human body is not, you don't start or end here. You have these interlocking fields of different energies, and information from inside is also stored out here. That's why when people talk, they use their hands.
Right.
And again, once you've been through this, like, I have this problem, and if I could just figure out where it was, I could fix it and put it behind me. Well, there it is.
Right there.
Right in front of
you. Where people gesture to and the way they gesture tells you the spatial location that information is stored, kind of like finding the filing cabinet, and the direction it's moving to maintain itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right? And this is happening below the threshold of conscious awareness as we're speaking and doing other things, because it's regulated by the autonomic nervous system, not your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is a linear entity. Neocortex is a linear entity. Everything else is nonlinear. So you can have multiple things happening simultaneously. But you have to remember that your gestural language predates spoken language by tens of thousands of years.
Interesting.
So your facial language and your gestural language are actually better indicators of what's going on. Right?
That makes sense.
So one of the things that we're going to do a process called Magic Frame. And the reason that I do this a lot, we have three techniques that we teach together. We call the Transformational Triad: Magic Frame, energy spinning, and color breathing. Now, there's levels to each of those. You can get deeper and deeper and deeper and get more comprehensive depending on what you're doing with the client. But this is almost like emotional, like emergency hypnotic first aid. Anytime. You can do this in a line at Starbucks, you can do it on a bus, you can do it in a movie, and it doesn't matter. And you can nuke most things with these three techniques. But the first one I want to talk about is arguably, for me, the most important. Because what happens is, as we move through the world, we encounter situations, circumstances, and events that hurt us. We feel pain. And if the same kind of thing happens more than twice, usually, your neurology says, I got to make sure that this never happens to them again. How can I do that? And it'll say, well, for example, if you had 2 or 3 businesses, lost them all, and each time you went through this intense emotional pain, or you went through unwanted attention, multiple times. Mm-hmm. Your unconscious mind will say, well, let's see. If they're not attractive, then that kind of attention won't happen. And this will never happen again.
Right.
Or if they never have a business, they can never lose it and they'll never feel that pain again. So I'm just going to write in this safety rule. Boom. You can never start another business. You can never be attractive or whatever. And from that moment on, even if you've done all the background work, for using a business example, like you know who to talk to, you know where to talk to, you know where the money's coming from, you know you've learned all the lessons you need to learn, you can't pull the trigger. And if you go to a therapist, what will happen many times, and this is one of the ways you diagnose this, if I can use that word. If you go to a practitioner for an intervention and the problem goes away and then it comes back, you've got safety lessons installed connected to that event. And what happens is the safety lessons connected to an experience are part of the experience. And your neurology, every time it's faced with the idea of letting the thing go, also has to contend with the idea that if you let this go, the lessons you learn from it will go too, and the shit will happen again. And so it will let it go away, and then it'll bring it back.
Right.
Because there's no clean methodology to extract the safety lessons or secondary gain and let everything else go. It's kind of like trying to unmake soup.
Right.
You try to unmake soup, it doesn't work very well.
Not after it's all mixed up.
Right? So the idea is, how do we convey to the unconscious mind a way that the lessons have been learned and are preserved, so it's willing to let everything else go? Because if the unconscious mind can't perceive a way to keep those lessons so it knows you're going to stay safe, or having to keep it all, it'll just keep it all. So two of the ways that you can start to figure out really quick if there are safety lessons involved is, does the problem go away and come back? Or let's say you, on a scale of 0 to 10, you have a level 8 or 9, right? And you do an intervention and it drops from an 8 to a 7. And you do another intervention, it drops from an 8 to a 5. And then it drops and you do another intervention and it drops from a 5 to a 2, and it doesn't move anymore. Just no more movement.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The moment you have one of those two events occur, 99% chance there's a set of safety lessons attached to that event that the neurology is not ready to let go of yet. It doesn't trust you that you've learned the lesson. And so one of the things that I teach my students is, if you're going to go out, and you can do just about anything with spinning or color breathing or framing, but the specialty of the frame process is that it allows you to extract the safety lessons from an experience, so you can keep all those lessons and let everything else go. And 9 times out of, better than 50% of the time, I want to go as high as 9 times out of 10, but that's probably a little high. 9 times out of 10, you don't need to do another intervention because it's gone.
That's the magic in it, isn't it?
Right? Yeah, but even so, whatever's left after you've done the frame can be dealt with by spinning or color breathing. So we call it the Transformational Triad, because you can go from magic frame to color breathing, from magic frame to energy spinning, from energy spinning to color breathing to magic frame. You can go in any different, like those Legos I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You can daisy chain them however many times you want in whatever sequence you want, multiple times, because it helps you to nuke everything, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is the magic frame. And so the first concept we have in our approach to transformation is, if you can point to where you feel it, you can change it, period. Right? The book to reference for that aspect of it, the interoceptive aspect of it, is called How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. So think of something on a scale of 0 to 10, it's like a 1, 2, or 3, something relatively minor that you'd like to just neutralize or get rid of. I want you to close your eyes, take a moment. As you think about that thing, I want you to just notice there's a place in your body where the feelings connected to the reason it's there are stored, where they grow and where they spread from. Take a moment and go ahead and point to where you feel that. That's right. Now, as you point to that with your one hand, I want you, if there were a picture floating in the space around you that represents that feeling, a picture that you could reach out and touch, take your other hand, reach out and touch where that picture would be. First impression. Excellent. Now take both of your hands, trace the outline of that picture with both of your hands so you know how big it is. Perfect. Now, you guys are probably too young to remember when televisions had real dials and knobs and switches instead of touchscreens and remote controls. But
don't make me laugh. I'm older than you are.
As you put that big black frame around, I want you to feel along the base of that frame. You're going to notice some dials and knobs and switches, like on an old-style television or remote or a touchscreen. I want you to find the knob that controls the brightness or the contrast. Physically turn that knob all the way to the right until the image whites out completely. Notice how that makes you feel. Then turn the knob all the way to the left until the image blacks out completely. Notice how that makes you feel. Decide which one you like better. Whichever one you like, go ahead and turn the knob all the way to the white or all the way to the black. And when that's done, I want you to take the index finger of your dominant hand, and on that whited out or blacked out screen, in glowing golden letters, I want you to write the lessons that this experience had to teach you, positive or negative, so you can keep all those feelings and let everything else go. Now, some people know exactly what those lessons were, and they just write it right out, lickety-split. Some people have no freaking conscious idea, but their unconscious mind always knows. So just like automatic writing, let that finger start to write in whatever language or alphabet it likes to use in its own way. Some people draw pictures. Some people get really reactant and pissed off and go, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, across the screen. Other people write with both hands simultaneously, like they're writing Chinese or Hebrew at the same time. Don't be bashful. Write as long as you need to. My wife, when she does this, she writes for 40 minutes at a time. It's like she's writing War and Peace. Doesn't matter. Let that screen will scroll like a tablet will scroll, so you have an unlimited writing space. You may notice as you continue to write that that feelings and emotions come up. If they do, that's perfect. Keep writing. Put them on the screen. When everything that needs to be preserved is on that screen, you just nod your head to let me know, and we'll continue. Perfect. I want you to reach up with both of your hands. I want you to grab that frame and the stuff inside of it. I want you to shrink it down to the size of a postage stamp. As you do, I want you to notice how the feelings in your body shift and changes with every breath you take and every beat of your heart. Your unconscious mind begins the process of moving that frame, that postage stamp, up over the top of your head, back beyond the horizon, till it dips down below the horizon and disappears completely. And as you notice it disappearing completely, you know the sound a hammer makes when you're banging on a nail? I want you to hear it nailed back there for all eternity, impossible to come back. And when you're certain, you realize and understand that it's nailed back there for all eternity, impossible to come back, test it. Try to bring it back and notice what happens instead.
I can't.
Scan your body, notice how different you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Open your eyes. Boom.
That was great. Thank you. That was awesome.
We had more questions, but this took up, it was just so intense and so detailed and everything that we just really appreciate you joining us with this.
And actually, before we wrap up, we do have a set of fast fun facts that we like to ask all of our guests so that our audience can get to know you a little bit better on a different level. So first of all, are you an early bird or a night owl?
I used to be very much a night owl. Lately I've become a reluctant early bird.
Keyword reluctant.
And a wife who is an early bird.
There you go. Well, it helps. At least you're going to bed closer together, huh?
Yeah.
Do you know your zodiac sign?
Yes, it's no parking. It's actually Aries Taurus cusp.
I guess, that would be, what about the 20th, 21st of April?
Right around there, yep.
What is the one song that gets you hyped up no matter when and where you listen to it?
The song. Yeah.
Eye of the Tiger.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Go.
What lights you up and excites you the most in life right now?
Watching people's lights come on.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Watching we call it seeing the Matrix moment. When all of a sudden the scales fall from their eyes and they realize what's actually going on and what they can actually do.
Right.
To me, there's nothing better than that. And regardless of the context, whether it's dating, social applications, persuasion, influence, hypnotherapy, energy work, metaphysics, math, it doesn't matter. The moment I see that transformation in them,
in their eyes, it's like a
That's cool. Awesome. And if our listeners could walk away with one nugget of wisdom from today's conversation, what would you want that to be?
First and foremost is that you are not the way you are because of what happened to you. You're the way you are because of the way you recorded what happened to you. And what the nervous system creates, the nervous system can change. And if you can point to where you feel it, you can change it. Period.
That's wonderful. That's awesome.
That was wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This was such an impactful episode, and I really just am so grateful for you to take the time to speak with us and to share all of your knowledge and those amazing techniques. We're just really grateful, and thank you so much.
Yeah. Come back to Florida and visit us again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also we'll see you at HTL Live. We're going to be presenters there, and we're going to celebrate that 10th anniversary, and we're really excited to share those moments with you too. Can you tell us, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what is the best way to get in touch to investigate your work or to
Take one
participate?
of the classes. Yeah.
Well, first thing is we have a really well-stocked YouTube channel.
That's good.
David Snyder NLP at YouTube. That's always, if you want to binge watch it. We also have a lot of the same content on our blog at davidsnydernlp.com, www.davidsnydernlp.com. That's DAVIDSNYDERNLP.com. And if you want your questions answered directly, you can reach out to my administrative goddess, Stephanie Skiba.
Mm-hmm. I've been talking to her.
She's amazing.
And she sure does hype you up. She really appreciates your work and your study and your personality and your drive, your resilience.
I couldn't put both hands without her, so.
Yeah. Shout out for Stephanie.
Okay,
Yay, Stephanie.
Yay, Stephanie.
I often make a joke. I say this usually tongue-in-cheek and usually not with the camera running, but I will tell you right now that Stephanie Skiba is the most powerful woman in the hypnosis industry.
Really?
Wow.
We're going to keep that in there.
Yeah.
We'll post this on Hypno Thoughts Live too, but it will be on 7 or 8 platforms, and we'd love for you to share it on yours and
Happy to.
pull some viewers in, and hopefully we'll get a chance to maybe do it again.
Yeah, it sounds
Part
like
2
fun.
coming up.
So thank you so much.
My pleasure's all mine. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you again, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Rise and Shine It's Hypno Time podcast. If you found some value in this episode and enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star review. Most people may not know that interacting with our content and our channel helps us to continue the work we're doing and reach more people. And we just want to thank you again from the bottom of our hearts for being such a loyal listener. And don't forget to tune in next week and every Tuesday for the latest episode of the Rise and Shine It's Hypno Time podcast with Dina and Suzanne. See you next week.